Guys, this is going to be a special video. I'm going to explain to you the narrative of the strongest. And honestly, I had almost forgotten how impactful this whole thing was before rereading it, refreshing on all the information again. But here in this video, I'm going to tell you everything we know about Akainu versus Aokiji and what it all means going forward. My regular Ragnarok guys have been smashing the like button, hitting every like goal I've set. So One Piece community, you gotta represent. Let's try to get to 150 likes on this video and we'll get another one out very soon. So the first thing we get about this fight was of course Jinbei's speech at Fishman Island, where he informed Luffy and the crew about Akainu and Aokiji's huge fight that shook the world. It was a major incident that the entire world patiently waited for the outcome of. Immediately after the Marineford War 2 years ago, Sengoku stepped down. This gave rise to the question of succession. Sengoku himself recommended Aokiji, a man who commands great respect from his subordinates, but amongst the upper echelons of the world government, aka the Gorosei, Akainu became the favored candidate. Jinbei goes on to say, as you may know, Aokiji isn't exactly a man of action, meaning he's lazy, usually doesn't get all hot-headed, he tends to take things as they come, but in this instance he objected vigorously to the prospect of Akainu becoming fleet admiral. The two were fiercely opposed. This is probably because of the history with Ohara, what he's seen from Akainu over the years, and in the end, this unprecedented conflict between two marine admirals culminated in an all-out battle between the two on a certain island. The terms were clear. Loser would forfeit all further rights to object. The victor would take absolute control of the marine forces. So this is just such monstrous hype. So badass to think that they fought for the position. I love that structure, that the Marines and the world government was down, just like, yeah, whoever wins is going to be in charge. Jinbei explains that the battle raged for 10 whole days and the whole world waited for the outcome. Though the two admirals were almost equal in strength, one man ultimately emerged victorious. The victor was Akainu, the new fleet admiral of the Marines. And then you see Luffy, of course, holding his chest, because that is, of course, going to be one of Luffy's biggest fights in the endgame of One Piece. Luffy asked, did Aokiji die then? Jinbei says both parties were severely wounded, but even Akainu could not find it in himself to slaughter the one-time ally who lay helpless before him. Aokiji staunchly refused to serve under the command of Akainu, so he left the Marines. Jinbei goes on to say the Marines have lost a powerful asset. Aokiji is no longer with the Marines, but under Sakazuki's tutelage, Marine HQ has become a more powerful force for justice than ever before. This being the first thing that we find out about this was absolutely epic, but this pales in comparison to what you actually see. We start to see this when the Straw Hats aren't even on the island. When they try to approach Punk Hazard, they see the fire, they see the volcanic eruptions miles away. The ocean itself was on fire. It was so hot that the fish in the water were getting burnt to smithereens. You have shots of fish bones floating up. The water was boiling. That's not even on the island. That's just in the vicinity. They then go on to highlight, how could anybody survive under these conditions on this island? Smoker makes mention of this. Usopp makes mention of this. To even get onto the island, they had to walk across Nami's clouds because fire engulfed the entrance to the island. There's no way to enter. They reach Punk Hazard and the whole island is on fire. So that we see so far. Everything you see. Nothing could possibly live here, says Usopp. The whole crew is sweating under these conditions. It's insanely hot. Town in ruin. Town burned. Fire everywhere. And then, of course, Nami notices that there's something strange about the sky above the island. It looks like there's an Arctic climate on the other half. Then, of course, we get the reveal that there's a giant lake in the middle, which is the epicenter of where their clash initially started. And this could honestly be interpreted as one single clash. People argue this. I'm not going to make that claim here, but it makes some sense that their initial clash did this. But you guys got to realize the scope of all this, which I'm going to continue showing, like the scale and size of the things on this island that are covered. Like the entire island is half hot, half cold. This happened 2 years ago. The fight took place 2 years ago and it still remains this extreme. The conditions are set permanently. And this actually doesn't even have anything to do with magma or ice, right? You see fire, you see snow, you see that the climate is just cold and hot. The temperature, the weather, all these things, right? A never-ending wildfire, a never-ending blizzard. These things go far and away above anything anything remotely close to what you have seen from Akainu and Aokiji. Smoker says 2 years ago, before it became covered in ice and fire, this was just an abandoned island. That's why Akainu and Aokiji chose Punk Hazard to stage their duel. A duel so fierce, it twisted the island's very climate. There go the confirmation right there. We also have seen what Punk Hazard looks like, even in the recent chapters before the fight. It was filled with green pastures, man. A very neutral climate, but it definitely wasn't in these extremes. So they completely changed the natural order of the climate here to something else on two opposing forces. That's how powerful this was. Just look at the shots of ships sailing. You even get a great panel of Marines watching, saying just entering this island makes it feel like Akainu is glaring at me. You can feel the energy that he left behind. Luffy highlights how strong the wind is. Even entering this island is extremely dangerous. Getting in the vicinity of the island, that's what I've been highlighting the whole time. Let alone being there under the extreme conditions that these men fought and created. This is 2 years removed. So imagine what it was like as it was happening in real time. Under these conditions, they continued to fight, directly opposing each other. The narrative tells you that not only was it the most imperative news, the first thing Jinbei wanted to talk to Luffy about, telling him about Akainu, him holding his chest, holding his scar. But then they have the Straw Hats actually go to this island to show us what it looks like when two admirals go all out. That's what they tell us. And then we get extra information about this in chapter 1081, where Aokiji recounts the fight to the Blackbeard pirates. And he tells them, so look at me now, I've only got one leg. I have to fill out the pair with ice at all times. And the Blackbeard pirates, who have seen admirals in action at Marineford, say, so that's what it's like when admirals fight for real. Jinbei said, unprecedented event. These guys are stunned and shocked. They all want to hear the stories about the admirals fight. Pizarro says, what about Akainu? Did you at least rip an arm off? And Aokiji says, nah, but he should be badly scarred all over, which corroborates what Jinbei said. They both took severe wounds, but of course Aokiji lost. We also understand from this conversation that Akainu had a quote, I assume near the end of the fight, where he said, two men who came up together through the ranks, now engaged in a fight to the death. I can feel something boiling up within me. The world hung in the balance of this fight. This was a monumental moment where they had to go to a barren island to fully fight all out. The only time in the series that we've ever seen admirals fight all out. Whatever Akainu and Aokiji showed at Punk Hazard is something far beyond the bounds of anything we've seen in the series thus far, indicating that they've been holding back in every interaction we've seen, which should be obvious because Oda makes a concerted effort to always hold back the admirals in every encounter. So it seems like a lot of cope, where people just don't like the thought of the admirals concealing their strength because it's going to confirm that they are actually elite top tiers of the verse when this does get revealed, although their feats already get them there now. You can check out my analysis videos if you want further clarification on that. But the fact is, they argue, is it a situation where even if what happened at Punk Hazard is more impressive and it's a bigger showing, them holding back destructive capability, why does that entail them being stronger in a 1v1 setting? How does that correlate to AP? Well, let me give you this. We've seen Aokiji, right? He formed an ice continent that was 3 islands long. Right, it spanned for 3 islands and it lasted a week. Okay, so we saw that when he does this, even with actual water that's already formed, it's only going to last for a matter of weeks. With Punk Hazard, we see that the climate of Punk Hazard was literally changed forever. Yet the island is split 50-50 magma and ice, and it permanently changed not only just the island, but the weather around the island. The climates in it of themselves were changed on the two halves respectively. Whatever happened to change this has far more potency than what was used, because you can't make the argument about like him just spamming more attacks, because what would him spamming attacks do if his baseline ice is going to just eventually dissolve after a period of time? Let's say that the reason the widespread AoE takes place is simply because of how extreme the temperatures are for the ice or the magma. So let's say that Aokiji reaches like a hypothetical absolute 0 or something with his awakening, where his ice is so cold it reaches that point. And that is why it permanently shapes the island. It is so cold that it expands everywhere. Just because it expands everywhere else and has an area of effect doesn't mean that means it's confined to only doing that. That could easily just be a byproduct of the actual ability for the potency of his AP, which is already kind of highlighted that even without using Awakening, they have varying levels of control Aokiji, namely, where he can freeze people down to the bone or surface freeze them, flash freeze them. We saw this with Doflamingo, and then there's a comparison to Jozu when he froze him. So we see this already, and we see that when they do their most potent attacks, both Akainu and Kuzan, they open their palm up. They make physical contact with their palm and touch you. This is very much in line with what Blackbeard does with his Yami, another Logia ability. This is in line with what Crocodile does with his Logia, where when he touches you with the palm, it is most potent. So that already leads you to talk about their most potent attacks clearly come from the palm, and that there's varying levels of potency. So the Awakening, if it has this drastic of an effect on the island, where it is something that is completely different from anything seen before, it leads you to a conclusion where it is very likely, or at least plausible, that the area of effect is simply a byproduct and not the gimmick, right? It honestly wouldn't even make sense for that to be something that Oda held back if it wasn't going to be something that's important from a narrative lens. We also see that it's very clear that Aokiji and Akainu knew damn well that if they were going to go all out, they needed to go to an uninhabited island to fully let loose. If they could just go all out without area of effect doing anything that was of any note or purpose, why wouldn't they just do it at Marineford? They've already fought at Marineford, right? If widespread damage isn't a byproduct of what they're doing, it could happen there, right? It's so obvious that the narrative tells you that they go to this island because that is where they can let loose. So clear. So how in good faith can you tell me that you believe that anything you've seen has come anywhere near what you've seen here? There's no way. There's no way you can tell me that this narrative right here isn't pushing these two to the absolute pinnacle of this verse. Not to mention the fact that Oda has specifically talked about how he's going to cherish writing Akainu's story. It's based on his favorite actor. He says he's the most handsome man in the world. He says that Akainu would have got the One Piece in 1 year based on strength if he was the protagonist, and he wanted to do that. Let all this sink in and reevaluate your thoughts on Akainu and Aokiji. Who else do you see where it's an entire arc dedicated just to show the damn devastation that was caused from a fight 2 years ago? There's not much more I can say on that, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.